here it is, the most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
Hi, I'm Taylor Bybee from Coaster Studios, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hi there, my name is Ryan Subler, and I'm from Christian Coasters, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hi, this is Fernie.
And Dee.
From Kidult TV, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
I accept the Coaster Challenge.
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 Do you accept the Coaster Challenge?
What is the Coaster Challenge? A group of regular people that went from fearful to fearless, all from riding roller coasters. So please secure your hats and glasses. It's time to take the Coaster Challenge. Here are your hosts, David Cantu and Jenna Gazelle.
Hey, how's it going, Jenna?
Great. How's it going, Dave?
It's going good, going good. Happy Friday.
Yep. I can't believe we're getting closer and closer.
We're toward the end of August. Can't get over it, man. Can't get over it. September
I'm so tired.
September is around the corner, and a lot going on. We got Labor Day coming up, and
school's back in session for me. Oh man, no wonder I'm so tired.
But it's still staying hot out here in Southern California.
Oh.
I feel like the summer heat just shifted. Like I think it stays pretty hot all the way until October. Yeah, I mean we really don't start feeling the cold weather until December.
If we're lucky, December
or January.
Sometimes it's not until February.
Yeah, I mean we have some of the weirdest weather. Literally, it's been kind of dry. We've been going through a severe drought here in the West Coast, and which is mainly because we haven't been getting much rain.
Yeah, there was an article that I saw about how this may be our new norm.
Yeah, I mean, they were showing Lake Mean out near Las Vegas, Nevada. That's like Lake Mean is part of the Colorado River, and it's dropped 250 feet. And Lake Mean is like the main water source that gives water to Vegas, Arizona, Southern California, and the Colorado River is just starting to dry up. There's a lot of major lakes further up north, all the way up to Idaho, going through the same thing.
Shasta. the last couple of times that I've gone up to Oregon to go visit family, driving through Mount Shasta, the lake, it used to be very high. Like you wouldn't be able to see the levels, and it's like amazing how much it's dropped. Same
thing with the Hoover Dam over in Arizona. The bare walls to the dam are now exposed for the first time, and it's scary because the Hoover Dam, the water flow generates the power for that whole area. And if there's no water to get those turbines going, we're going to start, it's not just losing water, but we could start losing power throughout the whole area of the West Coast, which is concerning.
Yeah,
it's very concerning. I think we all better start waking up and start paying attention to this. This is not just a West Coast problem, but this could become an entire country problem as well. So, but I'm pretty sure we can get this. We've gone through a drought in the past. We're going to be going through it again. Like you said, this is probably going to be a new normal. But, guys, I will tell you, it's been one heck of a summer. Kind of looking forward to the fall. This is where things get really busy. I'm really looking forward to all the exciting events that the theme parks are going to be having this season. Speaking of special guests, we've got a really awesome special guest with us today. Andrew's got a very, very good friend of ours named Nick Guerrero. Nick is a coaster enthusiast. He's from Tennessee. He's been a huge supporter of Coaster Challenge. Been a great friend. Love chatting with him. He's a big car guy, which him and Andrew get along so well with cars. But Andrew and him are on the podcast today, and they have a pretty incredible story.
You know what? The one thing I can't wait for eventually is to be able to go to a lot of these parks with you and meet a lot of these people in person.
I think you will be amazed how amazing the roller coaster community is. When I went to Hollywood Nights this past 2 months ago, I had every major coaster enthusiast, YouTuber, channels are all flocked down the holiday world, and I got to meet so many incredible people. It's like also being an ACE member. I'm a proud member of the American Coaster Enthusiast. It's a great organization, and also I like Coaster Crew. Coaster Crew is a really good group of coaster enthusiasts. There's a lot of exciting things, and they do all kinds of fun events, like Ace holds Coaster Con every year, and this year it was up in the Northeast, up in Pennsylvania, up in the New Jersey area. They even do international trips where you get to go with a group of people and go to different areas of the world and be able to ride coasters at the parks there, which I would love to take part of down the road eventually, so.
I don't know, some of the videos that we've seen from like the Europe area, some of those videos are a little scary with their safety issues.
Well, most of the ones we've seen have been at carnivals, but the theme parks themselves, they've got in Europe, in Japan, even in Dubai, China, Australia, they've got incredible theme parks, incredible coasters. And I know so many friends that have traveled to many of those countries. We've had some right on this podcast, got to share some of their experience. And if you guys haven't, I highly suggest those who are new to listening, I would say go back to some of our episodes. We have quite a few guests that have traveled all over the world and have experienced so many different coasters that I hope to be able to experience someday as well. But yes, Andrew's standing by with Nick today. But first, let's do our lovely segment, Jenna. Let's do our YouTube highlight clip of the week.
YouTube
clip of the week. Alright, so Jenna and I happened to find a really interesting YouTube clip. This is something that I was quite amazed. This is a roller coaster. It's pretty much a kiddie coaster. It's actually inside of a family fun center in Abu Dhabi.
Somewhere, I would say probably
Abu Dhabi,
Middle East, or
it's in the
India.
Middle East. It's in the UAE, Abu Dhabi. Yes, that's correct. Abu Dhabi. It's always pronouncing. But anyway, so this is inside of it's called Sparky's Family Fun Center, and it's a kiddie coaster. And if I had to describe what this kiddie coaster looked like, it reminds me of a wilderness run coaster over at Carowinds, Cedar Point, Kings Island. Kings Island was known as the Great Pumpkin Coaster, but this one's very interesting because the title is TPR Breaks the Roller Coaster at Sparky's Family Fun Center in Abu Dhabi. So these guys are on this coaster, and it's very interesting because I guess in the Middle East they must not have so many restrictions like we've seen in carnivals in Europe, but this coaster is in a very tight indoor setting.
I can't believe.
I mean, tight enough to where you can't even raise your hand. The whole term of keeping your hands and arms inside the vehicle at all times, this coaster really, this coaster proves why they keep saying keep your hands and arms inside the vehicle at all times. Because this particular coaster is indoors and it's in a very tight area to the point where if you raised your arms up, there's the water sprinklers on the ceiling. You can literally touch those pipes. You can touch the walls around the coaster. The signage. You can literally touch the neon signs. These guys were literally touching everything around them. You can't even put your arms up on this thing. Because like I said, it's meant to be a kiddie coaster. I don't think it's meant for adults to be riding this.
I'm still shocked at the fact that they built this coaster inside this really, really small area.
Yeah. But what's interesting about what happened in this coaster is, this type of coaster, you get 2 rounds. And so they go through the first round fine, but they're touching the walls. These guys are touching the pipes in the ceiling. It's like, wow. I go, if this coaster went any faster, they'd be breaking a limb here. I swear to God. And I will tell you, so they get through the first round. Then all of a sudden, they go through the second lap. And as they're going up the lift hill, all of a sudden, there was this sound. And all of a sudden, this pipe just flinged out of nowhere. And this pipe just fell to the floor on the coaster. I don't think it's a piece of track. But this coaster got stuck on the lift hill. They couldn't move it. But something like completely broke, and it shows The guy filmed it. This pipe like flinged off somewhere, and it landed underneath them on the ground under the lift hill, and they ended up getting an evac. So these guys, if they've never gotten an evac, they just got an evac credit on a coaster this time in Dubai. So it's like, wow, okay, or Abu Dhabi. But yeah, very interesting to see that a big, and this is not a small piece of pipe, folks. This was like 4 feet of pipe.
Yeah, at minimum 4 feet.
Yeah, and on a kiddie coaster. So yeah, this one, like, I guess the guys were kind of joking, because I guess one of the guys, that every time he goes on a coaster, it breaks.
Oh.
So he seems to have this jinx, like every time I get on a coaster, something happens. So I feel bad for that guy, man, because he's probably like, oh man, I'm afraid to get on the next big coaster because what's going to happen next,
right?
You know? So, but anyway, guys, this is a very interesting clip, but I will tell everybody, safety is very important. Yeah, this one, thank God nobody got hurt, but I guess something happened where it got stuck, caused a 4-foot piece of pipe break. It's not part of the track, but it's very interesting. But these guys kind of took it as a joke because they're on a kiddie coaster and the thing breaks.
Again, don't ever put yourself in harm's way on these rides. I mean, keep yourself safe.
Yeah, I agree. But anyway, guys, if you want to check it out, it's called TPR Breaks the Roller Coaster at Sparky's Family Fun Center at Abu Dhabi, UAE. But this was a good YouTube highlight clip of the week.
YouTube clip of the week.
All right, so Andrew is standing by with our special guest today. We got Nick Guerrero on. He's a really good friend of ours, great supporter of Coaster Challenge. Very excited to hear this episode, Jenna. So take it away, Andrew.
Thank you, David and Jenna. This is Andrew, one of the producers of the Coaster Challenge podcast with you today. And I've got a special guest that we're interviewing today. He's one of a friend of mine, actually, and a fellow coaster enthusiast. I'd like to introduce to the podcast here to the audience, Nick. Welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Thank you, Andrew. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Happy to have you. So why don't we start off, just tell us a little about yourself.
Again, my name is Nick Guerrero. I just turned 35. I'm a big advocate for coasters, theme parks, cars, all sports. I kind of love all that different type of stuff. I work for FedEx, which I love my job, and I am very happy to be friends with you and David. So
awesome. Yeah, we would definitely value you as a friend. We've enjoyed talking to you and doing, Zoom chats with you and on Instagram, and you and I talk all the time because you and I both have not just coasters in common, but sports cars. And so Nick, tell me, what was your first coaster that you rode?
Well, I'm going to answer this in kind of a couple different parts, but my very, very first coaster was Little Dipper at Kiddieland, which was just a kiddie coaster. But then I worked my way up eventually several years later to Viper at Six Flags Great America. And then from there to the real big leagues, Shockwave, the Aero Looper at Six Flags Great America. So those are kind of my big three.
Got it. Okay. All right. So those make sense for kind of your first coasters, kind of your early one, and then you kind of first big coaster. That's cool. That's cool. I actually love B&M wing coasters. Those are not very common. So in fact, that's the second one I ever rode there was X-Flight, and got some good wooden coasters. I mean, it's a good park. It's a great park. So,
yeah, I still feel like it flies under the radar too. It doesn't get talked.
Yeah, it flies under the radar, and it's basically at the same level number of coasters as Six Flags Great Adventure, which seems to get more publicity. I mean, Six Flags Great Adventure was my original home park growing up in New Jersey, and that during the coaster wars, I mean, that's got King Ka. It's one of the ones that got Batman the Ride back in the early 90s. And, it's gotten a lot of coasters over the years. It's gotten Flyers and Nitro, Hyper, B&M Hyper. So it's gotten a lot more love, I think, than maybe Great America has gotten over time. But so, yeah, like you said, it flies under the radar. Yeah, it's a shame. I think part of it, too, is being in the Chicago area. It's a huge metroplex, but the weather isn't quite as cooperative as it is in New Jersey for a longer coaster season and, things like that. So.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a shorter season for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. So what I'd like to ask you about, I'm guessing it's not the kiddie coaster you mentioned, but maybe, is tell me, and this could, again, it could be when you were a kid, it could be a week ago. Well, not a week ago. I know you haven't been to parks in a little while, but whenever it was in your life, what would you say was the coaster that scared you the most before you got up?
Definitely Shockwave. My first big looping coaster. Yep.
So your first, okay. So what scared you about it?
the unknown, the first time going on inversions, the first time going on something that tall. I mean, Shockwave, when it debuted, was one of the tallest, if not the tallest coaster in the world. You know, it was like 172 feet. I just looked up at that thing like it was out of this world, and it had it all. So I figured if I can ride that, I could ride it.
Yeah, when was Shockwave built? That was probably, what, late 80s?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, because it was, the Shockwave, Great American Scream Machine, Viper, they all kind of, very similar, just a few height differences.
Yeah, it's interesting because Great American Scream Machine at Great Adventure, that was my first looping coaster as well. So we kind of have that in common, the kind of Arrow Mega Loopers. I mean, you and I are pretty close in age, so it makes sense that an Arrow Mega Looper would be our first looping coaster and one of the scariest coasters. Yeah, okay, makes sense. Talk to me. I mean, how old were you when you first rode Shockwave?
I was about 7th, 8th grade, around that. So I don't know what age that would be. Probably like 13, 14.
Okay.
It took me a while because I rode Viper pretty early, and then it took me a while to build up to going on a looping coaster. So I kind of got peer pressured in on one of our physics trips there and fell in love ever since, though. So it worked out well.
Yeah, I love the Six Flags parks. They have their place. They're great for thrill coasters. And, a lot of their parks have a lot of coasters. You can get like a crazy coaster day in. But one thing that drives me crazy is how they name their rides. They use the same names, but for different types of coasters. It's like when you talk about Viper, I'm thinking about, Viper that you mentioned earlier, Viper, the Mega Looper, Arrow Mega Looper at Magic Mountain, or Great American Scream Machine. I always thought of that as the Mega Looper at Great Adventure. Well, the wooden coaster, quite frankly, the atrocity in its current form that it is at Six Flags Over Georgia, that's a Great American Scream Machine. And I guess you'll be experiencing that in a month or two, right?
Yep. 4th of July weekend. Yep.
Yeah, I've only ridden that once. That was a total one and done for me, at least for the time being. When I rode it in 2018, first time I went to Six Flags Over Georgia, the only time I've been there thus far. It was so rough. It is the roughest wooden coaster I've been on. But, you and I were chatting recently offline, and a friend of mine that's been there recently said they've done a lot of retracking. So you'll have to let me know if it's gotten better. So yeah, you'll know the quality of it from riding it. Okay, very good. Okay, so you were kind of a early teenager getting on Shockwave there. So talk to me what you were thinking, what was going through your mind and your feelings and so forth as you were kind of going through the line, through the queue, approaching the loading station.
Yeah, that was a tough queue to walk for my first one because it was a long queue. You got a long walk, now it's Superman's queue, but you got a long walk to get to that loading station. Basically, from the inner of the park all the way almost to the parking lot. So I had a lot of thinking, and it was everything from nerves to anxiety to a little bit of excitement, but everything else nerve-wise was kind of what was taking over. I didn't know what to expect, and I was like putting on a happy face, but deep down I was trembling. So I was pretty nervous, but a little excited.
Okay. So primarily like feeling anxious, feeling fearful, because again, it's a new experience. You were concerned how it was going to go, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But a little bit excited. Okay. All right. So then you obviously wrote it. You already heard about that. And then tell me, how did you feel after you got off the ride?
I felt amazing after getting off the coaster. I kind of felt like this burst of relief and happiness and excitement, because I conquered something that I didn't think I was ever going to conquer. And I loved the feeling that I got, going through those inversions and going on the ride. So it was just pure joy and just pure relief.
Okay. So, feeling afterwards, and this is what we hear again and again from our guests, and it's not surprising, you conquer a fear, and it goes from being anxious about it and nervous about it to, oh, wow, that was fun, and I want to do more of this. Our Mega Looper, those, like you said, back in the day, back in the late 80s, those were really tall, but I'm guessing you've been on taller coasters, even more inversions, faster, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I've been on King to Ka, I've been on X, I've been on pretty much you name it, I've been on it.
Okay. All right. So you've been on Top Thrill Dragster as well, I'm assuming?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So Top Thrill Dragster, King to Ka, less of a degree, and certainly X or X2. Certainly, those are the types of coasters that we hear a lot from a lot of our guests that they're very afraid of and so forth. But you did those later after you kind of conquered your initial fears with Shockwave. So getting on X for the first time or getting on Top Thrill Dragster or King to Ka, did you not really have much of that nervousness and anxiety?
Not as much, definitely as Shockwave, but if there's something new and something I haven't experienced before, your examples are perfect, like a dragster, like at the time when I rode X, I hadn't been on X2, but it was still the original X. I was still a little nervous because, the unknown, and back then, it weren't really the ride POVs and all these YouTube channels and stuff. So I was a little nervous, but, it was more of a good excitement nervous now, instead of just literally flat out being scared.
Okay, so that's interesting. So, and it makes sense to me, and this is kind of why I asked you actually, Nick, is we have a theory that, and it's not just coasters, it could be anything, but if someone in their life, if they work on facing their fears in a very concerted effort, and obviously waiting in line, going into the loading station, getting on a coaster, putting down the restraints and getting on the coaster, because not everyone does that. Sometimes people, as they say, chicken out, and they get to the loading station and they just walk across and they go over to the exit and wait for their buddies that are going to go on the coaster. But if you actually go through that concerted effort and get on the ride and conquer that fear, I call that fear training or fighting fear training. And that prepares you to be able to deal with potentially scary situations without having as much fear down the line. So, for me, my first coaster, that was a looping coaster, again, the Great American Scream Machine, that was really scary. And yeah, I've had some scary experiences since then on coasters, even though it was years later. The one big blip for me was X2, or when I first rode at X. And I've talked about it here on this podcast before. A lot of our listeners, a lot of our guests have similar opinions about X for various reasons. But other than that, there's been very few coasters, going on my first hyper coaster, my first giga coaster, going on these super fast launch coasters that are also pretty tall as well, like a King to Ka, like a Top Thrill Dragster, Formula Rossa, etc. But I haven't had any of that level of fear. For me, it's mainly just like, oh my God, I want to get on this. I want to experience this. So has that kind of been that way for you, Nick, overall? Is, again, less about fear with these new rides and more about just getting excited to get on them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a perfect way to put it. I still have those little bit of nerves, but like I said, it's more of the excited nerves, just because human beings, it's natural, the unknown. So we'll be a little nervous about that. But yeah, anything that comes out, I can't wait to get on it. I know with all this craziness that had happened with the pandemic and all that, we've gotten a lot of new coasters coming out. And now parks are starting to open up and different things, and starting to plan coaster trips again. And I'm super pumped to get on all these new rides that I haven't been on yet.
Oh, I bet. I'm sure. I feel the same way. And, if we look at things on a calendar year basis, and if you think about it, the pandemic here in the US kind of started towards the beginning of last year. About March is when it really kicked in, versus say this year, we're now, so this is being recorded here in very late May of 2021. And it's just a couple months past the 1 year anniversary of the pandemic. But, us as coaster enthusiasts, granted, myself, I live in Florida. I know you live in Tennessee, towards the South, we're kind of used to being able to either with local parks or, for you, parks that are not terribly far away, you can do it in a day's drive, getting to parks that are pretty much open year round, certainly for me are open year round here in Florida. And it's just been night and day, for my experience here this year. The parks have been open the whole time. They've been open since last summer, quite frankly, here in Orlando. But not only that, but getting on, like I've talked about at length on this podcast, my new number one Velocicoaster, this brand new coaster opening this year. It's like night and day between this year and last year. And thank God for that. We all knew this pandemic wasn't going to go on forever, but it certainly could have been where this year was like last year. They were still concerned about social distancing and a capacity and surges and so forth. So we're fortunate in that regard that at least it seems like it was just kind of like a year of really kind of focused quarantine and social distancing and the masks and everything else. And thank God for science and the vaccines, the various companies that come up with the vaccines. And here we are with new coasters opening. And, Nick, I know you and I were texting earlier today about, when you're planning to come down here to Florida, ride some of these new coasters like Velocicoaster, and probably by then Iron Gwazi when you're going to be here and et cetera. Icebreaker and whatnot. And, again, I think, we've talked a lot on this podcast with other guests about how the pandemic taught us what we've been taking for granted in a huge way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
that's well put.
Yeah. Thank you. So, and that's a good lesson to learn in life. big, very important lesson. So, well, in any case, so you've got some of this fear training, even when you're a teenager, with Shockwave, and now you're really more focused on enjoying coaster than being afraid of them, even brand new ones. So tell me, perhaps in other areas, even beyond theme parks and coasters, how riding Shockwave, conquering that fear, getting yourself to be able to conquer fear, did that impact your life in other ways?
Oh, 100%. And it still does to this day. I was young, obviously, life hadn't fully grabbed me yet at that point when I was going through Shockwave, but I still have very vivid memories of that day and kind of use that technique towards anything, whether it's a new challenge at work or a new challenge at home, outside of work or things like that. I'll kind of go, okay, look at how this turned out. I was super scared for years to go on these coasters and go on inversions. And then I went on it, and now I couldn't do without. It's gotten me countless numbers of memories and now friends and great relief and feelings, and that was part of it too. I struggle with anxiety and I struggle with panic attacks and things like that. And coasters kind of do give me some of that relief. And, so even if I'm going through something like that, I can think about the next coaster I want to go on, or think about the next park I'm going to go to, or start chatting with like you or David about stuff. And it kind of helps me in that aspect too. So in more ways than one, coasters and theme parks and immensely help my life.
That's fantastic. Wow. So yeah, obviously I know you being in Tennessee, you live near Memphis, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So there's not like a lot of coasters near you and so forth. So, when you're having some anxious feelings about whatever it may be in life, or even, God forbid, a panic attack or something like that, you can't necessarily just jump on a coaster. But have you had, maybe not living in Tennessee, or maybe the timing was right, or maybe when you used to live here in Florida, would you have, in your adult life, or at least since you wrote Shockwave as a teenager, have you had times where you were feeling anxious or maybe depressed or just going through kind of a bad time in those kind of ways, where you went to the parks and they helped you?
Yeah, and I'll actually answer kind of both ways, because here, unfortunately, Opryland and parks that would have been close to me have closed down. But what I do now is I'll go on YouTube and I'll watch, ride videos, or like I love that aerodynamics documentary that Ace did, or things like that. So if I can't get to a park like I am now, I'll do something like that, where I'll watch something on YouTube. But when I was living in Florida, absolutely, because actually when I was living in Florida, in Orlando, is when the panic attack part of my anxiety really started to surface and have issues. And the first time I had it, luckily my parents were just a few hours away and they drove up with me. And the first thing we did when they got there, we slept and woke up the next morning and went to Universal. Had a great day at Universal. And from there, obviously, I went to the doctor and did some checks and things like that. But going to those parks, Islands of Adventure and Universal really helped get me through until I could start to take care of that with, medicine or whatever I needed.
Sure. That's really, really great. And I love hearing that. I mean, this is not a new story. This is something that I myself have experienced. I'm going through a lot of challenges myself, right? In my life, early 2021, as I've talked to you at length about it, Nick, offline. And I've been spending a lot of time in the parks lately, not necessarily because of what I'm going through, but certainly that's part of it. Is like, I know I want to get out and do stuff and see my friends and do these things that give me escape from the real world for a little bit, that healthy escape and that theme park therapy, as I like to call it. But another aspect of it too is, not icebreaker, a Velocicoaster opening, not even the same company, Premier versus Intamin, but yeah, with Velocicoaster opening, here back in early May for previews, and now it's soft opening, technical rehearsals. I'm like, I got to be Universal. I'm there about once, maybe twice a week, which, considering Universal's about 45 minutes to an hour from my home, it's pretty good, considering all my, the work I have to do and take care of my animals, take care of my house, my pool, my hot tub, and all that. But I get down there more than I generally have in the past because of that new amazing coaster. And it's been great for me to help kind of just give me stress relief and just avoid having crippling anxiety. So I love that, you even when you were younger, still living in Florida, you had that experience. And so you mentioned YouTube videos too, because like you said, you can't always get to the parks now. So I think that's interesting, because you and I, we oftentimes chat at night because we're not working. We're both not working. So we have more free time. And, oftentimes when I'm checking in with you, hey, what are you up to? And you're like, yeah, watching YouTube videos. So yeah, that's kind of the next best thing to being at the park. So do you watch a lot of POVs and things like that?
I try to avoid POVs a lot now, unless especially if it's something new. But I do love watching, different videos, like I said, like that Aero documentary, or, there's people that have top 10 lists, of, the best inversions or the top coasters in Europe, or, things like that. I love all that type of stuff. Or there's a great series called Problematic Coasters. I love watching that. So things like that are really what intrigued me. I try not to spoil myself with the POVs too much. I will watch the POVs on stuff from back in the day, defunct coasters or whatnot that, I long to ride again, but won't. So that kind of gives me my fix.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. I feel pretty much the same way. I really have gotten the point over the past, 5-10 years or so, where maybe in the past I would look at POVs and spoil myself, but now I'm like, nope, not going to do it. I want to experience the ride for myself.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah. How many times now, but just be honest, Nick, how many times have you watched that documentary?
Honestly, I've probably watched it 4 or 5 times. I probably would have watched it more in college, because I know I've talked to you about this, Andrew, especially when we first started talking. One of my big college papers I wrote was on Ron Toomer, because I was fascinated by him and all that. He changed the coaster industry back in the day when he was doing what he was doing, with Magnum and all that. So, I would have probably watched it maybe a dozen times back then. But, now with the family and work and things like that, I don't have as much time. But I always seem to once in a while kind of just, that shows up on my recommendations. I'm like, you know what? I want to watch that again. So it's been 4 or 5 times at least.
Yep, I know. I remember exactly where I was when I wrote that. I was back when I was traveling a lot for work, and I remember I was in a hotel in the Bay Area, far from SFO Airport in San Francisco there. And I'd recently heard about that documentary. It was a few years ago. I'm like, I got to check this out. So I finished dinner, I came back to the hotel, and I watched it for the first time. I was like, oh my God, I was blown away. Because in reality, it is about Aero, but the reality is it's really about the evolution of modern theme park attractions, especially coasters, but log flumes as well. Because Aero, starting with the Matterhorn back in the very late 1950s with Disney, they invented the steel coaster, the modern coaster, and then went from there. And, they were the kings of coasters back into, from the 50s into and through the 1980s. And it wasn't until, the late 80s and the early 90s when B&M came around, of course, with their inverted models like Batman and later, Montu and Alpengeist and all these other inverts that happened through the 90s, and then of course other models from B&M, floorless and whatnot. But really, Aero was the pretty much the only game in town that for major parks for coasters and other attractions, as like log flumes and whatnot, for a long time. So it's really a history of modern history of parks.
Yeah, absolutely. I was shocked watching it, knowing how not knowing how much involvement they actually had at Disneyland and opening all those attractions. So that was kind of cool to read, because I'm kind of a Disney nerd too. So. Oh
yeah, and you worked at Disney during the college program, didn't you?
Yep, I did that, and then I also worked at Universal after that, because when I graduated, I was gonna go back down to UCF and do hospitality and all that stuff. So I ended up working at both parks.
Awesome. And I believe you worked at a very special attraction at Universal, didn't you?
I did. Dueling Dragons, not Dragon Challenge, not Hagrid's, the original Dueling Dragon.
That's awesome. Yeah, I rode Dueling Dragons. I went to Islands for the first time just a few years after it opened. I experienced OG Islands of Adventure in October of 2001. I went there, I think, just for the day, and I rode Dueling Dragons. I did Spider-Man. I did Hulk. All these incredible rides. It's still incredible ride. Well, of course, Dueling Dragons is not here anymore, unfortunately, but Hulk and Spider-Man are. And even 20 years later, they're still awesome. And all these new things that have come and replaced other things and so forth. But yeah, Islands is such an amazing park, and that's really cool that you didn't just work on that worked in a store or something or at a kiosk. You actually worked on a highly revered and unfortunately defunct coaster. So, I mean, how many times have you ridden Dueling Dragons, would you estimate?
Oh, geez. That's a good question, because it's a lot. Because, when I was a lead, one of the leads usually was one of the ones who did the test ride in the morning if you were opening. So, I would do that every time I worked. And then whenever I was there, I would ride it multiple times because, I knew people. So I would just kind of get right on. So I don't even know, probably, I don't know, maybe 100 times Fireside, 80 times on the ice side. I was definitely a Chinese Fireball fan over the ice side, but both were
wow.
good.
That's really cool. Yeah, I figured it was going to be in the dozens, if not hundreds. That's impressive. And I know some people that keep track of their number of rides. I mean, Coaster Count, which is the app that I use to keep track of my credits, how many coasters I've been on, period, and how many parks I've been to and whatnot. It's a great app. I love it. It does allow you to count re-rides. I don't do that, but I know people that, for their favorite coasters, they do that. But, I've actually decided to start doing that because I'm obsessed with Velocicoaster. And my buddy Austin, he actually posts on Twitter, it may still be his pin post, that he's obsessed with it too. But it's such an amazing coaster. And I've been keeping track thus far, at least, of how many rides I've had on, about 15. And I even updated my social media. That's part of my tagline, how many rides I've had on. We'll see if I keep it up or not. But the other thing I'm really enjoying about it is getting on Velocicoaster with people that have not been on it yet, like buddies and friends that are visiting town. I've got a friend of mine, actually a friend of the show, Bennett Coaster Dolphin. He was actually one of the first guests on the Coaster Challenge podcast. He's going to be in town this week, and he and I are already making plans to probably on Friday meet up and get on Velocicoaster. So be able to, I mean, on his first ride, but one of his first rides, be able to join him. And then other friends of mine, they're coming at the end of June, and their first time on Velocicoaster, and I'm planning to be there first day with them. It's it's so much fun, and you'll understand when you get here. I guess maybe early next year. It sounds like Nick. I think you'll understand.
Yeah, hopefully.
Why
I'm hoping sooner, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Okay, well, tell me what was the craziest moment you ever had on a coaster?
As a rider, I would say
yes.
The first time going on X, which I know you said, you hear a lot, but it really was because, it was just kind of a guy's trip. Me, my dad, my brother went to California, went to Six Flags Magic Mountain, obviously, one day, and we sprinted back to X. That was the new big coaster, still in its pink paint glory. And my brother and I hopped on. We were the second ride of the day. And all of a sudden, we lower and we start backing up, going up the lift hill. And like I told you, I didn't really have POVs or things to watch at that point. And my brother and I just look at each other halfway up the lift. And we both say at the same time, are we about to go down this drop backwards? And we had no idea what was happening. But then sure enough, it flips you over and you kind of face dive down. And man, that coaster is, I know this is cliche, but it is literally like nothing else you could ever experience in your life. It's nuts. And that was probably the craziest feeling I've had on a coaster as a rider, for sure. I've had some other crazy off-ride experiences, like when I worked at Universal and stuff, but on-ride, definitely that X story.
And that's totally respectable and totally understandable. I've not been on that ride, 80 or 100 times like you've been on Dueling Dragons, but I've been on X quite a few times. And yeah, that ride, and I've ridden its two sister coasters, Dynaconda at China Dinosaur Park, as well as Ajanika at Fuji-Q Highlands. I've ridden all three. That's one of my kind of feathers in my cap, but I've ridden all three of them. I'm very proud of that. And they're all very similar, by the way. And they are all, those Arrow 40 Shilky masterpieces, Alan Shilky masterpieces are very different. And again, I'm not trying to be too superlative, but while those are your quad rail coasters and there's nothing else like them out there, it really wasn't until, certainly after riding X, God, I rode X the first time, back in, late 2001. It would be about 10 years later, January 2011, I rode Formula Rossa. And I've ridden, all kinds of crazy. I'd ridden King to Koff years after X, and Top of Dragster about, 2 years later. All these crazy fast coasters and crazy LSM launch coasters and, things like Volcano I've ridden since then. So, I've had all these, other unique experiences, unique coasters. Verbolten, is another very unique one, great theming, but launch coaster, but it's it's got the show building stuff and rock and roller coaster, all these crazy coasters. It wasn't until this year, basically 20 years later, where riding Velocicoaster, between the theming of it, the layout of it, the pacing of it, I finally have ridden a coaster where I'm just wowed again. Not scared like I was of X. X still scares me. All three of those Hour 40 coasters scare me because of that first drop. It's just that goes against human life preservation that we all have. That's why people have a hard time jumping off of buildings, even though David just did that. But it's just X fall. And just I just recently experienced Falcon's Fury for the first time, Busch Gardens Tampa, and the same thing. It's like, oh wow, it's like X, but as a drop ride. But the rest of X doesn't really freak me out. But Velocicoaster, it's not, again, not a fear thing. It's just a wow, like, oh my God, that ride is intense and amazing. You know, I'm glad I finally had another experience like that, you know, after all these crazy hundreds of coasters between 2001 and now. So I totally get why X would be such a unique experience. Now, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you. So Nick, so you talked about your most unique on-ride experience was X. Again, totally get it. Makes sense, like we talked about. What about your off-ride experiences? Sound like maybe you had some experiences working as a team member at Universal. Can you maybe tell us a couple of gems there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The one I always jump right to is the first time we had to evac the Ice Dragon off of the brake run. So the brake run is kind of right there by the main castle, which actually still stands there for Hagrid. Right next to there is where the first set of brakes were for the Ice Dragon. And then, you know, it'd be released and it would go kind of make a half horseshoe and then go into the castle. One time we had some electrical issues or something happened, you know, transmitter went out, lightning storm. I forgot exactly what it was, but the Dragon came to the brakes and it hard stopped right on those brakes. And kind of we lost power to everything. It's pouring rain. It's windy. You know, one of those Florida storms I'm sure you're all too familiar with that just pops up in the middle of the day for no reason for about an hour. And
yes.
Yep. And so me and my team, we do our lockout tagout stuff. We head out there and we just start evacing the people off the ride. But you know, this brake run's a good, 100 feet in the air, 80 feet in the air. So you're having to get them out, escort them down, back up into the castle. And then from there, you know, you got, I'm going to backdoor you on the next ride you want to go on, or, you know, taking care of that guest service. But just the experience of evacing people, which I always find to be fun as a rider, but doing it from the other perspective was pretty unique. But on top of that, with it being pouring rain, being where it was, you know, and kind of that open, you know, field of where Dragons was, and then, you know, wearing our costumes or our theming or whatever you want to call it that we were wearing, it was just a perfect storm of a fun time.
Literally and figuratively, perfect storm. Yes.
Yeah.
So being that it's an inverted coaster, so did you guys how does that work because people don't have, you know, flooring under them to be evac?
Well, the brake run has like a metal graded floor underneath it with stairs going up to it. So there's kind of this tool you get, and it's right above the harnesses. You unlock the harnesses, they pop up, and then you can only do one row at a time. You have to have a person in front of you and a person in the front of the pack and a person behind the last to kind of escort and make sure people don't run off or, you know, go into the track's path or anything. So they just hop off onto the steel grade. We'd walk them down the stairs, back up into the castle, run back out and do it again for the next row.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, for safety reasons, you have to take it, you know, one row at a time. You have to be really careful for sure. So is that, yeah, I get that there's flooring under there, and I've seen that on inverts, but isn't it like right not below people's feet, you know, for clearance reasons that people have to kind of jump down or?
Yeah, it's a little hop down, you know, if you were a little bit shorter or younger, you might have a little bit of a hop, but most of the time, if you know, the parents would kind of help them hop down, or, you know, I'd grab their hand so they could do it or whatnot, but it wasn't too bad.
Interesting. So I've not personally had this experience, but there was a friend of mine a couple of years ago here in Florida did a special tour where actually they can climb up the lift hill and stuff on SheiKra at Busch Gardens, Tampa. Of course, that's a, you know, pretty tall B&M dive coaster, but also floorless. They were telling me that if the train gets stuck on the lift hill, which can happen, you know, especially with block safety type features, and, you know, if the next train has an issue and, you know, they may get stuck in the lift hill, may have to evac. And they were telling me that, and they were showing me pictures they took, that there's flooring, these floorboards, the metal floorboards that they have to put into place on the lift hill so that people can get off because it's too far down and so forth. So it's crazy to have to be evac in those. Okay, so that's a really good story. Thanks for sharing that with regard to kind of that evac situation with Dueling Dragons. Very cool. So tell me, we've talked about a few coasters you've been on. Maybe you've already mentioned this particular one, but what is your favorite coaster of all time?
My favorite coaster of all time, and I know I get some controversy for this, but it's Raptor at Cedar Point. I don't know why. That coaster's got a special place in my heart, and I love it. And I haven't had anything really come close for a long time, other than Lightning Rod at Dollywood. That's a close two.
Okay, so those are very good answers. When I first rode Raptor, It would have been my first visit to Cedar Point, which was in 2001. Definitely got some good coasters that year, good parks. First time at Islands, first time at Cedar Point. So just tell me, I'm curious why that's controversial. Is it because among the B&M inverts or among coasters in general, a lot of people don't really have that as one of their favorites?
Yeah, I just think, you don't really hear, especially even at that park, people hardly even have it in their top 3 or top 5 at that park. So the fact that it's my overall, I'd say that's kind of why it's a little controversial or funky. But those BMM inverts, I haven't been on a bad one. I love them. Maybe it's because of the Dragons stuff, but it's always had a special place in my heart.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, but, as far as Raptor being your favorite, I think there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I know, Mac, you may have heard of this person, a friend of mine, fellow coaster enthusiast. I've met her a couple times here in Florida. She lives here in Orlando. Her nickname, as some enthusiasts, they kind of have coaster-based nicknames. She goes by Raptor Joe. Her name is Joe. Her favorite coaster manufacturer is B&M. She loves B&M. She's worked on Mako for a number of years at SeaWorld here in Orlando. She, I believe, worked on Raptor, Dueling Dragons, etc. She's loves B&Ms, especially their inverts. So I think there's nothing wrong with you having Raptor as your favorite. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. We don't like to talk about too much negativity on the show, but just to kind of see the other end of things for you. So you love B&M inverts. You kind of just mentioned that, and Raptor is your favorite. So of all coasters you've been on, what would you say your least favorite coaster is?
My least favorite coaster is Son of Beast without the loop. I don't know if it's the fortune or misfortune of having both credits, both with the loop and without the loop, but that was hands down the worst coaster I've ever been on. It was rough. It was boring. It was just a horrible mess of a ride, especially after they tried to repair all the issues that thing had. And they took the loop out and changed the trains and everything they did. But yeah, Son of Beast without the loop, hands down.
How did you feel about Son of Beast with the loop?
It was okay. I think about it more and more, especially because you and I have talked about it before. I liked it. It was fine. I think the reason I say I liked it was more of the novelty of what it was back in the day. That was the biggest, baddest thing out there. And the first time with the loop on a wooden coaster and, over 200 feet and all that stuff. And so, I don't remember getting off and saying, oh my gosh, I need to ride that again and again. I just remember thinking like, oh, that's cool. I conquered, this, no pun intended, beast of a ride. And we went back years later and the loop was gone and it was just trash.
Interesting. Yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Any other stories you wanted to tell?
I don't think so. I think we've covered a pretty good array of things. I do want to thank, you and David, especially you, Andrew, for getting me involved in this and getting me involved with the Coaster Challenge community and bringing awareness to it. I'm going to a park this weekend. I will be proudly wearing one of my Coaster Challenge or Coaster Challenge podcast shirts. I look forward to the day where you can show me around and do all those things you want to do, like getting on Velocicoaster and Iron Gwazi and all that. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. No, absolutely. And my pleasure. And, I've loved you and I, how we've connected over these past couple of years. And I also love how much, as you were just describing, you've really embraced the mission of Coaster Challenge, and you wear our apparel proudly at parks. And in fact, I believe, David, who's on here with us, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you, with getting a shirt for Tucker, your son, your very young son, Tucker is the youngest Coaster Challenge fan. I'm pretty sure of that. So thank you for that as well. And great photo you've sent of Tucker. And I love that you've named Tucker, going back to the other hobby and passion that you and I share, cars and sports cars and whatnot, that you named him after the famous Tucker car, which was way ahead of its time. That's really cool. Some of the people we have on the show, they have YouTube channels and so forth. And, not everyone has that. So I believe, Nick, you don't really necessarily have any channels, but normally the last thing we ask people is where people can find you on whether it be a website or, social media, Facebook, Instagram, etc., Twitter, YouTube channel. Is there anything like that you'd like to share with our audience so they can find you and connect with you?
I don't, like you said, I don't really have that YouTube channel and that stuff. If you guys want to look for me, I'm always liking or posting on the Coaster Challenge stuff, or you can look up the friends of David or Andrew and find me if you want to chat for sure. I mean, I will definitely plug a couple YouTube channels and podcasts.
Sure.
The ACE podcast, obviously I've been on that as well. So, but that's helps you, Andrew, and
sure.
If you guys are loving this podcast, go check that one out. I love all the different YouTube channels like Airtime Thrills and Coaster Dash and Theme Park Predictions and Theme Park Crazy. There's tons of great ones out there. El Toro Ryan. So go on, check those out if you can't get your coaster fix, especially with being far away or you just can't get to a park that day. Get on your phone or your TV and watch or listen to some of those channels or podcasts.
Great. Those are some great ones right there. And yeah, thank you for plugging some other great, YouTube channels and whatnot. Certainly one of the things about our podcast and our channel that's a little different is we are not in it for ourselves. This is where any money that we make from selling T-shirts and other apparel goes to charity. Given that, it makes it very easy for us, and that's what I love about Coaster Challenge, to really not be in competition with anyone else. We're not in competition with anyone else. We believe in building people up and supporting other channels. We support any channel that, just tries to do what they can to help the community. We don't like people in channels that tear others down or bully and whatnot. We're very anti-bullying. But again, if you've got a good channel, like you mentioned some good channels there that are just trying to, push the enthusiasm and help people to be passionate about this great hobby, that's awesome. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being on the show with us today. Nick, it was great talking to you.
It was great talking to you as well. And again, I appreciate being on the show. And anytime you guys need anything as far as Coaster Challenge, you can reach out to me. And when Tucker gets a little older, Tucker.
Awesome. Look forward to that. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Nicholas. That was really awesome. I think it was a great episode. Jenna, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize Andrew was that big of a sports car nut. Me personally, I like muscle cars, but each their own.
Both big on Porsche. They love Porsche cars, and I agree. Porsches are great sports cars. I know Nick is really big on Porsche. I've seen several of his posts on Instagram. Really awesome, and he's just been a great friend, and his coaster story and him working at the theme parks, just really amazing. I just really, really hope that everybody out there who's listening learned something today from Nicholas. And
definitely.
And I will say that it was a great episode. Really want to thank him for coming on and supporting us. Podcast. We've got another very exciting episode happening next week. But Justin, how can our listeners be able to find us on social media?
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And if you want to see more from us, we upload every Friday. And check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all at Coaster Challenge. Links in the description.
Thank you, Justin. Well, guys, make sure to tune in with us next week. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and make sure to share our podcast with your friends and family. Make sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star on this episode, and make sure to drop some comments in there. Let us know what you think. Send us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. But until then, this is David Cantu.
This is Jenna Gazelle.
We'll see you all next week, right here on Coaster Challenge.